Hi, so if you're looking at this video, you've probably joined BSB151 and want a bit of an understanding about how the subject works and why we've set it out the way that we have. So hopefully this short video will give you an overview of kind of how things fit together and why we've structured the course the way that we actually have. Because in some respects it can be a little bit different to the way you might approach many of the units offered here at QUT. So the first thing I want to cover is this idea about how we best learn. Obviously, there needs to be some form of transmission of the material from what we expect you to learn to you. Traditionally, that's been done in a lecture format, in a big amphitheatre where you listen with a lot of your colleagues to what's going on. At its best, the lecturer will probably ask a few questions to make you think, provided you're engaging at the same time. Okay, so that's the way it's traditionally done. What do we know from research about how people actually learn? Well, what we know is that there are two best ways to learn something at a deeper level. The first is by practice testing. Now, that sounds very dramatic, but all it means is that you have to try and think about what we're talking about. And by actively thinking, you realize what you know and what you don't know. Okay, so this idea of practice testing is also called active recall, and it's a core aspect about what we're trying to do in the way that we structure the course, to move away from this transmission into more active recall when we're actually together. The second thing that's important is distributed practice, or interleaving, it would be another way to put it. What that means is if you try and do all your learning just in kind of one big hit, like a 3-hour lecture, then you tend to remember less. Okay. So the best way to learn is to go over things several times at different time periods, at different spaces, and that embeds the knowledge more. What I've got here is some results from a meta-analysis that looked at all different ways of learning, and you might actually have used some of these. So for instance, you can see self-explanation, which is kind of like you might have heard it called the Feynman method, summarizing or highlighting the text, using mnemonics, rereading stuff. Generally these have low utility in terms of learning. You might think you're working hard, but you tend not to remember too much out of it. Granted, there are some people who don't fit this pattern and who can learn probably just in one read through, but most people can't, right? The best way that we've found through research is through this idea of practice testing and distributed practice. So that's what we're going to concentrate on. So what we can see here is a general pattern for how we try and deliver the material for you to get this distributed practice. Okay. Also, what we've tried to highlight on this slide is where the practice testing actually takes part as part of the process that we've designed. Okay. So the first step that you need to do is to prepare for the week's material. That will be through reading through the slides and watching a vodcast. Now, in many ways, the vodcast replaces a kind of traditional lecture. Why? Most traditional information transfers are fairly static. I mean, I can make it interactive, but I can make it a lot shorter if we reduce that interactivity just to get the transfer down. Okay, so that's why rather than have a 2-hour lecture, we've got about an hour of videos where it's just kind of straight delivery in 10-minute segments, so you can take a break to make sure that you're still concentrating on what's going on. As well as that, we have the perusal system, which we have a separate little presentation on for you to look at, where you can interact with the slides and your colleagues, right? So that's a form of practice testing, and am I really understanding this? Can I explain it to someone else? What questions does it arise? So in the preparation, we do have some practice testing, and it's the first exposure. Well, probably 2 exposures in there, reading the slides and listening to the vodcast. Okay, we have 4 lectures, so that's another exposure. In those lectures, I will tend to be more interactive than downloading information to you. So after the lecture, we've got the main area of contact, and that's the tutorial. So there's actually kind of two steps with the tutorial. The first step is preparing for it, right? So trying to actually do the problems that we're going to do in the tutorial before you get there. Why would you do that? It's a form of practice testing, okay? So it helps you understand whether you know what we're going to do. And it will highlight what you don't know, which will make much better use of your tutorial time. Okay. The second thing that occurs is it's a second or even third time to go through the material, right? Because so far you've read the slides, you've watched the vodcast. Now you've prepared for the tutorial. Okay, so now we've got 3 forms of distributed practice. Then we actually get to the tutorial where you do the application. Everything we're doing in the tutorial is centered on the kinds of tasks you're going to be asked to do in the assessment. Okay? Whether it's an analysis for an ethical case study or how you'll be expected to answer a problem on the exam. So it's very worthwhile that you attend the tutorials. And again, I really want to emphasize they're focused on the application of the material that you should have been through in preparation for the time together. And they're 2 hours long. So we've got a lot of time. Well, not really a lot of time from my perspective, but a lot of time from your perspective to go through it and make sure you understand the core concepts from each week. Okay, so that again is another form of this distribution of the practice. We're now up to about 4 goes at engaging with the materials if we're following the pattern. And again, yes, it's a form of practice testing because you'll have to recall and work with the material. Finally, after that, you can review the material. Like, that's up to you. I would suggest you review the material at least a day or a couple of days after the tutorial to embed that knowledge. Then we have another exposure, which is either the quiz or the exam or the ECS, preparing the ECS, right? The assessment is this last exposure where you demonstrate to us you've learnt it through those previous 5 or 6 exposures and that you understand it and can apply it. Okay, so that's the general pattern that we're using, right? This is why we do it the way that we do it. It has a lot of practice testing involved and a lot of distributed practice to hopefully help you learn as easily as possible. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the next couple of slides. I'll leave you to have a look at them. But what it's really saying is that the activities that we're doing feed directly into your assessment pieces. The material we cover in the vodcasts and the lectures will directly contribute to your case study, quiz, and exam. Okay. Also, the readings directly contribute to those things because they're on what we lecture. Also, the tutorials are where we do the same kinds of problems that we're going to do for either your case study or the exam and or in the quizzes. Okay, so it's all aligned, and that's what we're trying to demonstrate with these particular slides. You'll also notice that on the bottom, I've got an idea there about how long these tasks should take you, right? So if you're doing the ECS, how long each week is it going to take you? 6, 8, 9, somewhere between 9 and 12 hours, right? That's what it's going to take if you follow through the pattern. But remember, that's what you signed up for, right? These subjects expect 12 hours worth of work a week. So hopefully this gives you a sense of where you might want to spend that time. And again, this is how we might spend the time if we're actually looking at the quiz and more legal orientated element, which has a lot of emphasis in the exam. Now, as you've been going through some of the materials on the subject, you're probably starting to think, geez, there looks to be like a lot of assessment. Well, like yes and no. Like there's a lot of dates where potentially you can submit something, but realistically, I think that there is a reasonable amount of assessment and workload for a 12-hour subject. So what we've got here is a little chart by week and date, and also you might see over the right hand side it actually has the days: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So this kind of grid tells you when something is due and what face-to-face contact we have on over the semester. Now what you can see is we're pretty free up until week 5. That's when the case study is due. So what we've tried to do is to ensure that all of the assessment for a particular assessment item occurs together and doesn't overlap. So the first thing you've got to do is the case study. So weeks 1 to 4, prepare for the case study. Mainly do that by coming to the tutorials. From week 6 to the end of semester, there's essentially one thing happening every week. Okay, so every 2 weeks, beginning from week 5. So in weeks 5 and 6, you have to review the materials as a reading assessment piece as part of your portfolio. So that reading assessment piece is due on the Friday of week 6. Then on the Monday of week 7, we have a quiz on that material, right? So this is preparing you for the quiz. It's not really extra work. It's work you should be doing anyway, and you're going to get rewarded for it in terms of assessment. Okay, and that's all we do, right, for the rest of the semester. So week 7 and 8, the reading is due on the Friday of week 8, and the quiz is due on the Monday of week 9. Weeks 10 and 11, reading is due on the Friday of week 10. Weeks 9 and 10, the reading is due on the Friday of week 10, and the quiz is due on the Monday of the week 11. Okay, so that's the general pattern. And of course, the exam is sometime in the exam block, and that's worth 50% of the assessment. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an understanding of how the semester is structured, where the workload is, why we have structured the course the way that we have, and what you can expect by taking part in the subject. Okay, so I know a lot of people work, your time is short. What if I can't do all that? Well, my first point is, should you really have enrolled in a 12-hour subject if you can't do it? Okay, so putting that aside, the first thing I would suggest is that you do all the assessment, do the reading tasks, do the quizzes, get some runs on the board. Why? Practice testing helps you learn. So if you do those things, it's going to help you learn for the exam when it comes time to review. Okay, so my first thing is do the assessment, because part of that assessment is you just being exposed and reading the material and then testing on it. So even if that's all you did, you're going to go a long way to getting through the subject. I think in terms of the materials you want to go through, read the slides on perusal, which is part of the assessment. Look at the vodcasts so that you get across the material, and then look at any readings that might go into depth. They're more supplemental, right? If you understand what's on the slides and what's going on and can apply that, you're going to do very, very well in this subject. The other thing that I'd suggest you really do is do application. So once you've been through the material at least once, make sure you do some application. The easiest thing to do is to attend the tutorial. Ideally prepare for the tutorial, right? I know not everyone is going to, and that makes it a little bit difficult to manage, right? Because we have different levels of knowledge. We can handle that, but come to the tutorial so you know how to apply it and what's going to be expected in the assessment. So that's my order of priority if your time is limited. Okay, well, I hope that that's given you a bit of an understanding of the subject and what you can expect. Remember, if you have any questions, BSB151 inquiries email is the way to go. If it's anything general about admin, try HiQ. But look forward to seeing you in class.